Stephenking, a master of horror and psychological drama, plunges readers into an abyss of grief, loss, and the perilous attempts to cheat death itself in his 1983 novel, Pet Sematary. This work is notable not only for its terrifying scenes but also for its deep exploration of the human psyche, the destructive power of despair, and the irreversible consequences of meddling with the world of the dead. Part 1. New Life, Old Secrets, and Early Omens. The story begins with the Creed family's relocation to Ludlow, a quiet town in Maine. Dr. Lewis Creed, a young and ambitious physician, accepts a position as head of student medical services at the University of Maine. He moves with his wife Rachel, their 5-year-old daughter Ellie, 2-year-old son Gage, and their orange cat named Church, Winston Churchill. Their new house seems ideal for family life, but it's situated dangerously close to a busy highway where heavy trucks constantly roar by. This seemingly minor detail at the beginning becomes a recurring motif of the impending tragedy. Although Lewis feels an inexplicable sense of foreboding, he tries to ignore it. Soon, the Creeds meet their closest neighbor, a friendly and wise old man named Judd Crandall. Judd becomes more than just a neighbor to Lewis. He becomes a mentor, gradually revealing the strange and eerie secrets of Ludlow. During one of their walks with Judd, Ellie discovers a path in the woods behind their house that leads to the Pet Sematary. This is a makeshift cemetery where local children bury their beloved pets killed on the dangerous highway. The cemetery's name is misspelled with a childlike error, Pet Sematary, giving it a peculiar whimsical appearance. Lewis initially views this place as touching, though somewhat sad, evidence of childhood grief. However, the first true omen of disaster comes to Lewis at his new job. During a clinic session, a student named Victor Pascoe dies from horrific injuries sustained in a car accident. Just before dying, a bleeding Victor strangely addresses Lewis with cryptic words. "Don't go there, Lewis." Miles from Mick, "That ground is sour." Lewis dismisses it as a dying man's delirium, but the words etch themselves into his memory. That same night, Victor Pascoe appears to Lewis in a dream, leading him to the Pet Sematary and reiterating his warning about the danger, emphasizing that the dead are better off dead. Lewis wakes in a panic, finding dirt on his feet, which seems to confirm the nightmare's reality. Part 2. Grief, Temptation, and Dangerous Help. The pivotal event that triggers the chain of horrific occurrences happens when the Creed family travels to Chicago to visit Rachel's parents. While they are away, Church the cat is killed by a truck. Lewis knows Ellie will be inconsolably grief-stricken over her beloved pet. Seeing his despair, Judd Crandall offers help. He leads Lewis beyond the Pet Sematary, deeper into the woods, to an ancient, forgotten burial ground of the Micmac tribe. This place, which locals call the burying ground, is shrouded in ancient legends and a sinister aura. Judd explains that it's not merely a cemetery, but a place where the dead can return to life. He persuades Lewis to bury Church there. Despite his inner resistance and a growing sense of unease, Lewis succumbs to the temptation to ease his daughter's grief. He buries Church at night in this cursed place. The next day, the cat returns. But it's not the Church they knew. He looks dirty, smells of decay, his movements are clumsy, and his behavior is aggressive and strange. He no longer purrs but emits odd, guttural sounds. Lewis tries to hide the truth from Rachel and the children, but deep down, he knows he's done something terrible. This return of Church becomes the first, yet deeply unsettling, sign of the true nature of this place. Part 3. Unbearable Loss and a Mad Decision. The true tragedy that shatters the Creeds' lives occurs when their young son Gage dies. During a family picnic, Lewis, distracted for just a moment, sees Gage run into the road and get hit by a massive truck. The scene of Gage's death is described by King with unbearable brutality, making it one of the most painful and traumatic in the novel. Gage's death rips the family apart. Rachel plunges into a deep depression, experiencing unbearable pain and blaming Lewis. Lewis himself is consumed by overwhelming grief, guilt, and despair. He cannot come to terms with the loss of his son, and a terrible yet irresistibly tempting idea begins to form in his mind to bring Gage back to life using the magic of the ancient burial ground. Judd Crandall, witnessing Louis' complete despair, desperately tries to dissuade him. He tells Lewis about chilling precedents where people had tried to bring back their loved ones, and the horrifying consequences that followed. Specifically, he recounts the story of Timmy Baderman, a local boy who died in the war. His father Bill buried Timmy in the same spot, and Timmy returned. But it was no longer his son. It was an empty, cruel, and demonic animated corpse that terrorized his own family. Judd explains that this place doesn't bring the dead back to life, but merely imbues the body of a deceased creature or person with an evil entity that uses their body as a puppet. What comes back is not your child, Judd warns, emphasizing that this ground is sour and plays with human grief. However, despite all warnings, Louis's grief is so overwhelming and his psyche so shattered that he ignores common sense. He becomes obsessively intent on digging up Gage's body and transporting it to the ancient burial ground. Part 4. The Return of the Dead and Inevitable Horror. Rachel, along with Ellie, travels to her parents in Chicago, attempting to recover from the tragedy. This circumstance gives Louis a horrifying opportunity to execute his plan. He exhumes Gage's body from his grave in the municipal cemetery, an act that seems impossible, but for Louis, consumed by the madness of grief, no obstacle exists. He then carries his son's corpse through the woods at night to the ancient Micmac burial ground. This journey is filled with horror, exhaustion, and Louis's moral degradation. He recognizes the full horror of what he's doing but cannot stop. After burying Gage in this cursed place, Louis waits. A few days later, Gage returns to the Creed's house. But, just like with Church, it's not his son. It's a grotesque, repulsive creature that only vaguely resembles a small boy. His eyes are empty, he stinks of decay, his movements are clumsy, and his voice sounds strange and horrifying. Gage speaks crudely and maliciously, using words a 2-year-old child would never know. Threats and accusations begin to emanate from his mouth, directed at Louis. A terrified Louis finally realizes the full horror of his mistake. He sees that his son has returned not as a child but as a demon inhabiting his body. This creature, full of malice and violence, begins to terrorize the Creed household. Meanwhile, Rachel, feeling a vague unease and premonition of disaster, decides to return home early. She calls Louis but cannot reach him. Finally, Louis answers, and Rachel senses that something is terribly wrong. Gage meets her on the stairs. He holds Louis's surgical scalpel, which Louis had forgotten after the Victor Pascow incident. The terrifying Gage kills Rachel, inflicting horrific wounds upon her. Her death becomes the final straw for Louis. Climax and horrific resolution. Louis, consumed by madness and unbearable grief, realizes he must stop this evil. He finds the dead Church and kills him, understanding that he too is a product of this cursed place. Then, he decides to end his son's suffering. He pursues Gage throughout the house until he finally corners him. In a culminating scene, Louis kills Gage, his son who had become a monster. This scene is the peak of the tragedy, demonstrating the protagonist's complete moral and psychological collapse. But even after killing Gage, Louis cannot escape the clutches of despair and madness. His mind is completely broken. He takes one last, most horrifying step. He carries the body of his dead wife, Rachel, to the ancient Micmac burial ground, hoping that this time it will be different, that Rachel will return to him as she was before. The novel concludes with an ominous and open-ended final scene. As Louis sits in his house, awaiting Rachel's return, the door opens and someone enters the room. It is Rachel. She stands in the doorway, her body covered in dirt, her eyes empty and lifeless, and her voice, distorted and horrifying, utters only one word. Darling? The novel ends here, leaving the reader in a state of complete shock and horror. The final scene offers no relief, only deepening the sense of hopelessness and the curse that has befallen Louis. Core themes and symbolism of the novel. The destructive power of grief, Pet Sematary, is one of the deepest explorations of how unbearable grief can distort the human psyche and drive individuals to commit horrifying acts. Acceptance of death. The novel raises questions about the inevitability of death and the danger of ignoring the natural order of things. The attempt to bring back the dead is an act of defiance against nature itself. Ancient evil. The Micmac burial ground is a source of ancient, sinister evil that doesn't merely resurrect the dead, but transforms them into empty husks inhabited by demonic entities. It's a place that feeds on despair and destroys everything it touches. Moral boundaries. Louis faces terrible moral dilemmas that test the limits of his humanity and sanity. Each choice he makes leads to even greater tragedy. Consequences of actions. The book vividly demonstrates that not every action, even if undertaken with good intentions, like Louis wanting to ease his daughter's grief, then bringing back his son, can lead to catastrophic and irreversible consequences. Family relationships. Tragedy completely shatters family bonds, showing how fragile relationships are when confronted with unbearable grief and horror. Indigenous mysticism. As in many of King's other works, there's an element of ancient magical forces and curses linked to indigenous peoples of America, which are typically dangerous and destructive if not respected or used appropriately. Pet Sematary is not just a horror story, but a deep, chilling journey into the darkest corners of the human soul, leaving behind a feeling of profound unease, hopelessness, and unforgettable dread. This novel is considered one of Stephen King's most powerful and bleakest works.